So everybody in the scientific community realized if it was smaller, I don't want to say everybody in the scientific community, speaking absolutes there, as the data came in, they realized that this actually meant if it was smaller, then if you do the math, there wasn't a problem anymore. There was no need for this hypothesized supermassive object dubbed Planet X at that time. So after 1992, the scientific world stopped searching for Planet X in that regard. Okay, Planet X has since become named as like a placeholder for the next thing that we find or whatever, and that's a little bit different. But as far as explaining the gravitational anomalies that existed on Neptune and Uranus, nobody's looking for that anymore. But Marshall Masters is. And he doesn't mention the Voyager 2 thing, which is really disingenuous because that's like extremely common knowledge. And I'm certain that he knows about it. I mean, how could you not know about it if you're claiming to be so informed about this? Okay, so moving on to the Nemesis theory. You may have heard a lot about Nemesis. And I've often wanted to dig into Nemesis to see exactly what was going on with it. And I was surprised to see how kind of silly the idea was. I mean, essentially, the guy who proposed that Nemesis, that is to say, a potential star companion of our star, a binary star, which again is not a weird thing. Scientists are open to the possibility, but it would have to be extremely far out in order to make sense of why we... anyway, I'll get into that as I talk about this. The reason why it was proposed is because of a perceived cycle of mass extinctions in the geological record, which seem to occur more often at intervals of about 26 million years. So there was this belief that, according to the geological record, every 26 million years, not 1,000, we're not talking about the precession here. We're talking about a totally different periodicity of the 26 million year cycle that was believed to be an extinction event every 26 million years. First of all, that was even just one of many things that essentially would try to solve that problem. The idea was that, okay, so every 26 million years, maybe something orbits in a certain way in the Oort cloud. You remember that when I talked about that thing that was on the outside of our solar system? Maybe it's kicking in some comets from that Oort cloud every 26 million years, and that's why we're getting hit by that more often. Now, since then, and that would be just one of many reasons, right, if such a thing was true. And that was widely even admitted by the people that proposed this theory, the guy that proposed it, and later proponents of it. So, anyway, the evidence now is that such a 26 million year period does not exist, and the belief that it did exist was based on, I think, what they call statistical artifacts or something like that. I'll read what it says here. In 2001, Corin Baylor-Jones did an analysis of the crater, in 2011, Corin Baylor-Jones did an analysis of the craters on the surface of the Earth and reached the conclusion that the earlier findings of simple periodic patterns implying periodic comet showers dislodged by hypothetical Nemesis star to be statistical artifacts, and found that the crater record shows no evidence for Nemesis. However, there was a study a year before that one that says this, that's by Merlo and Bambach, found strong evidence in the fossil record confirming the extinction event periodicity originally claimed by Ropp and Sepkoski in 1984, but at a higher confidence level and over a time period nearly twice as long. Okay, so now the people in 2010, before the ones that said there was no periodicity, that was statistical artifacts, before that, the people said, okay, yeah, there is some kind of periodicity, but it's twice as long. So that would indicate twice as long orbit. One of the big things that people say about Nemesis, why it can't be true, like the scientists say, okay, like this is what the guy came under heat because he said it was a 95,000 AU, which is 1 light years away. Anything in an orbit of that far away from the sun is so close to the breakaway, what do they call it, the breakaway distance or something like that, of the sun's gravity. I mean, you're just so close. It's such a weak gravity at that point that you're just so close to being out of there. So they said nothing at that could have a regular orbit because it's such a weak gravitational field at that distance. The orbit would be so weak it could never be consistent, certainly not 3,600 years. as Sitchin said. But anything that far away, especially like Nibiru, would be so vulnerable to every sort of influence because of such a weak thing. It would be to say that it was a regular orbit. I'm getting a little off topic here. But what I want to say about this is that what most people have discounted Nemesis now is because of WISE. WISE is the second-generation infrared telescope that specifically searches for brown and red dwarf stars, and if there was anything in our solar system or close, it would have found it. Now, the jury's still out with WISE because it still needs a little bit of time to collect some data. They take multiple this thing literally takes pictures of the entire sky, like the entire known infrared sky. So there's a lot of data to go through. But what we do know is there's nothing big close. But they still don't rule out the possibility that there's a brown dwarf companion star, but it would be one of those really distant ones. I mean, there's nothing close, but maybe it's one of the distant ones. But they won't know for sure until the other data is compared. Essentially, they need to have two pieces to compare with to see which one's moving. But to make a long story short, there's nothing close. And if they are, WISE will find it. And WISE is the second generation of something, an infrared telescope, one of which is a really big problem for Marshall Masters' theory, IRAS, in '83. Let's talk about IRAS. I don't know how he never mentions this, but he actually just says that Planet X was spotted, and this is all over his website. It's in every one of his videos. He mentioned something about, oh yeah, IRAS, was reported in the Washington Times that they found Planet X and stuff like that. And that is such a plane on the ignorance of people about that. And we're going to talk about the crux of his theory here as we get into it, the solar stuff, because that's where it all falls apart for him. But this idea of IRAS taking a picture of Planet X and there being a big cover-up about it is so wrong. What happened is in when IRAS was the first thing that NASA put out there that was going to do infrared. So it was going to see stuff that nobody had ever seen before. Nobody really knew what to expect. What's going to happen when you look at the sky in infrared? Nobody knew until the data came back from IRAS. When IRAS came back with the data and they looked at it, there was these big anomalies. Of course, everything is an anomaly at that point, right? You're looking at these things, and in a press conference, they asked these scientists, what could these anomalies be? And the guy said something, paraphrasing, like, I don't know. We don't know yet. It could be anything from a 10th planet to a distant galaxy. Something very, very similar to that. The Washington Post, however, ran with the 10th planet idea, forgot about the distant galaxy part of it, and said, scientists say 10th planet found, and here's the picture, or whatever. So Washington and other news agencies picked it up. So that's where it gives it validity. The Washington Post reported that they took a picture of it based on this guy's saying this at a press conference. I mean, he's tried to, as much as possible, say what had happened, but people won't listen to the guy that want this to be Planet X. But here's the issue. You can now go and check. Look, you can see the follow-up data. They took much better pictures of this area with much better equipment, much more detailed pictures of just that to figure out what the anomalies were. And they found out it was what they call an ultra-luminous infrared galaxy. These are galaxies. You've probably seen these pictures of like these things giving birth to stars, they're really amazingly beautiful pictures and stuff like that. If a galaxy is birthing a bunch of stars, it gives off this ridiculous amount of infrared. And so it's dubbed an ultra-luminous infrared galaxy. Of course, it's new because it's infrared, so it's, one of these things that we now know exist as a result of looking at the sky in infrared. That's what it is. Everybody knows it. Nobody thinks that that's a planet. Nobody thinks it's a planet except for Marshall Masters, I should correct. To say that if somebody comes up and says, oh yeah, Washington Post reported on it and they took a picture of it, then you just tell them that they don't know what they're talking about. So, the crux of the matter with Masters is this. He basically says Planet X is really close now. I mean, 2 suns are going to appear in the sky next year. This thing is on its way. He thinks it's going to come between, I think, Mars and Jupiter. So we're talking inner solar system object. He says it's the size of Jupiter, which in itself is a blunder because no binary star is going to be under 15 Jupiter sizes. I mean, that's the smallest brown or red dwarf that we've ever heard of. there is a belief that they can get as low as 11 to 13 times the size of Jupiter, because it needs to be at least that size to be able to produce the things that happen in brown and red dwarf stars in terms of the internal fusion and stuff.